Legend has it that in the 29th year of his life, Prince Siddhartha left home in a quest to find an answer for all suffering. He would eventually find it and came to be known as Gautam Buddha, the Enlightened One. But for the first 3 decades of his life, Prince Siddhartha lived a life of complete indulgence and luxury, knowing only pleasure, while being shielded by his father from all discomfort. That place, the Buddha's home, was the lost city of Kapilavastu. Kapilavastu was an ancient city in the eastern Gangetic plains of the Indian subcontinent. It was the capital of the Gana Sangha or Republic of the Shakyas in the late Iron Age between the 5th and 6th centuries BCE. Buddhist texts such as the Pali Canon mention Kapilavastu as the childhood home of Gautam Buddha, where he lived along with his parents, King Suddhodan and Queen Maya of the Shakyas. It is here where Prince Siddhartha lived in luxury and indulgence for the first 29 years of his life until he went on his spiritual journey. The Buddha lived at a time when the Shakyas held relative power. They were the vassal state of the kingdom of Kosala, from whom they had broken away earlier. Although this power did not long last, and after the Buddha's death, the Kosalas once again annexed the Shakya territory. But, like the impermanence of things preached by the Buddha, even this situation soon changed. The Kosalas were soon conquered by the rival Magadhan kingdom, and the Magadhans were brought under Nanda rule, ending the Mahajanpad stage of history and the beginning of the first Indian empires. The Nandas, on the other hand, were deposed by Chandragupta Maurya, who set up the Mauryan dynasty. In all this time, Kapilavastu's fate dwindled. It never regained its former importance from when it was the capital of the Shakyas. About 200 years after the Buddha's death, Ashoka became emperor, and it was only during and after his life that the places associated with the Buddha gained importance. Unlike other places associated with the Buddha's life, Kapilavastu never became a major pilgrimage spot. It was probably never as big as depicted in Buddhist art, and after the decline of Buddhism in India, its location faded into obscurity. Even major Buddhist sites such as Lumbini had to be eventually rediscovered. In the case of the rediscovery of Kapilavastu, we have not one but 2 sites bringing forward that claim, one in India and the other in Nepal. In this video, we will take a look at both the sites and their claim to Kapilavastu. But before we go to the first site, we have to understand a story. The Mahaparinirvan Sutra mentions that the Buddha passed away in Kushinagar. Upon news of his death, the Shakyas wrote to the rulers of Kushinagar asking them for a portion of his relics on the claim that the Buddha was Shakya by birth. The rulers of Kushinagar did not agree to this. Before this conflict further escalated, A Brahmin, Drona, intervened and reminded both the kingdoms of the Buddha's teachings and asked them to avoid war and bloodshed and instead split the relics. So, the Buddha's relics came to be split into 8 portions, one each for the kingdom that was demanding them. So, the Shakya clan came to receive a portion of the Buddha's relics along with 7 other kingdoms. But these relics were further distributed over the centuries to far off lands as Buddhism continued to spread, and people forgot about the original burial spots and they were lost to time. In 1897, William Claxton Pepe, a British landowner and engineer, came across a large earthen mound in Piprawa, Uttar Pradesh. He was inspired by the recent rediscovery of Lumbini, a mere 16 kilometers away. After some consultations, Pepe led an excavation at the site and dug it up via a trench 18 feet deep. This led him to a large stone coffer containing 5 vases, which contained bone fragments, gold ornaments, and gemstones. In fact, these reliquaries held the largest group of precious offerings ever recorded in a single deposit, around 1800 gemstones. Now, what is relevant to our story is that on one of the vases was a Brahmi script inscription. It can be translated as, "This enshrinement, Nidhana, of the corporeal remains, Sharira, of the Buddha, of the Shakyas, the Lord, is to the credit of the Shakya brothers, of the highly famous, together with their sisters, with their sons and wives." Since then, over a century of examination of the site and the inscription has indicated that the site is indeed authentic. So, this marks the only time that a site of the original division of the Buddha's relics has been discovered. The other 7 sites have still not been found yet. Now, the tragedy of the whole thing is that these original relics of the Buddha from around 2,500 years ago were actually given away by the British to the king of Siam, that is called Thailand now, as a part of their petty appeasement politics. And some of the other relics went to the Pepe family. So, one of the few things that remain in India on public display is the empty vase with the inscription on it that is kept at the museum in Kolkata. Coming back to our story now, why did the Shakyas choose Piprawa as a site of burial for the Buddha's relics? He clearly was an important figure for them. They were even willing to fight over him. So Piprawa surely must have been an important place. Was it their capital though? In the 1970s, K.M. Shrivastava led an archaeological survey of India excavation in Piprawa. They found an ancient monastery with a courtyard with more than 30 cells around it. They also found terracotta ceilings and a pot, all of which bore the same inscription in Kushan script of the community of the monks of great Kapilavastu. This evidence has led some scholars to believe that Piprawa is the site of the city of Kapilavastu. But others believe that Kapilavastu was at a different site, less than 20 kilometers away across the border in Nepal. Let's have a look. Fa Hien was a 3rd century Chinese monk who had traveled to India in search of authentic Buddhist texts. Huan San, a 6th century Chinese monk, also traveled to India for the same reasons. Thankfully for us, their travel accounts have survived. Together, their descriptions of ancient India give us vital information about the times. They visited all the Buddhist sites in the region that included Kapilavastu. Through Fa Hien's accounts, we learn that Kapilavastu was already in ruins in the 3rd century and that it was surrounded by many monasteries. Their descriptions of the sites also give us their respective location from each other. If these descriptions are to be taken as fact, then Kapilavastu is at a place that is known today as Tilorakot in Nepal. In 1899, P.C. Mukherjee started excavation at Tilorakot, which was not that far away from Lumbini. Working for the Archaeological Survey of India, Mukherjee had recognized a mound which was covered by a forest was actually the remains of a rectangular fort which was surrounded by a wall and a ditch. The earthen wall was found to have been built on the top of an earlier wooden structure which was dated to around the 6th century BCE. So that is around the Buddha's time. At the center was a second inner walled complex. The walls served to separate this inner complex from the surrounding city. This walled complex could have been the central monument that was mentioned by both Fa Hien and Huan Sang during their respective visits to Kapilavastu. In the past century, archaeologists have found multiple gates surrounding the city and the ruins of many Buddhist viharas and stupas. The findings at the site can be dated from 1000 BCE to the 3rd century CE. A study conducted by a team from Bradford University in 1997 using ground penetrating radar found evidence that suggested Tilorakot as the likely site of Kapilavastu. However, unlike Piprava, since there was no inscription found, this claim cannot be verified conclusively. But it is also true that many important Buddhist places identified in the 20th century like Gridakuta, Veluvana and Brahmayoni were all identified on the basis of circumstantial evidence, that is to say, on the accounts provided by Fa Hien and Huan Sang. And in the case of Kapilavastu, their descriptions seem to point us towards Tilorakot. And because of this reason, my own personal hunch is also on Tilorakot as the real location of Kapilavastu. Since the past century, Nepal and India have both been promoting their claim of Kapilavastu. One of the factors behind these claims is nationalist pride, that is to say, apply labels of modern nation-state identities retrospectively. Now, this is a futile argument because the borders of ancient kingdoms were never constant, and the Shakya kingdom was certainly spread across both Nepal and India. Instead, the governments of both the countries should work together to explore, document, and identify the sites mentioned by Fa Hien and Huan Sang. This will help preserve a shared cultural heritage, for the Buddha's own message is about harmony. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video valuable. If you did, please consider subscribing. It helps out a lot. If you want to see a video about a lost and found Buddhist temple, I will link it in the description box below. For more history related content, stay tuned to this channel, and I will see you next time.